Good morning / evening, everyone. And I see so many of you here, especially from my own class. That's great. Should be quite an interesting session we got today. So a few sort of practical activities, or as practical as we can be, lined up. So we will ask for your sort of participation during the session in terms of some polls that we're going to try and some new things. So hopefully that will work. And it's great to see so many of you discussing those introductory questions, because so many of, or one of the theories and models we're going to cover today ties directly into the discussion questions that we were just having. And it seems like I'm going to summarize what your responses have been, that if you hear a loud bang in the middle of the night, your emotional reaction kicks in first. You don't think about it, but I think I could safely say for many of us, we'd probably wake up terrified. And then the cognitive processes then kick in for us to try and justify that, thinking that we're being burgled, or someone that we've got an intruder in the house, etc. So now it's interesting, and we will go back to that example later on during the presentation.
All right, so the conference this morning is on emotions in cognition, and we're going to take a look at some of the theoretical approaches to this topic. Much of this should be familiar to you from your reading, but there will be some examples and some activities that I think will make everything a little bit more coherent. These are the learning outcomes for both this topic and more generally for the cognitive level of analysis. I think that you want to pay particular attention to this learning outcome and to this one.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to start with looking at the biological and evolutionary explanations, which I can see some of you have already done the reading in Crane and looked at Ledoux's model, which is actually going to be our starting point for today. These are quite tricky explanations, so we'll use the earlier example of the sort of being woken up in the middle of the night to sort of try and bring this to life somewhat. Okay, so as I say, if you've got any questions as we go through, please feel free to sort of type them as we go along. Now, according to Ledoux's model, it's the amygdala, which is the short route. He says there are two routes for emotions. One is a short route and one's a longer route. And it's the amygdala, which is this short route that you'll see here. Okay, and this contributes to what we would say is the non-conscious aspect of fear. Okay, and many of you said that the moment you woke up, Irene gave a lovely example. She said that her heart would be racing, she would feel really startled, really anxious and scared. Okay, and that's a non-conscious aspect of fear. Okay, so we have these two systems operating simultaneously, but one is a shorter route, which gives us that initial reaction, and one is a longer route, which provides us with the cognitive element that allows us to sort of understand and appraise the situation. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to show you a series of 10 different pictures. Each picture is of a different animal, and we're going to try the polling feature here, okay? And I'll try it before we start. And the options are always going to be the same. So all we want you to do is look at the picture, and I don't want you to think long and hard at all. I want you to go with your initial instinct when you see the picture, okay? And the idea is that you'll select the letter A if you think that the animal is scary or dangerous. You'll select the letter B if you don't really have a reaction to the animal, you don't think it's scary, or you think it's neither scary or not scary. And then finally, you'll pick the option C if you think the animal is definitely not scary and not dangerous, so something that isn't harmful to you at all. So there's our animal, and the poll will arise now. There we go.
Okay, don't think about it.
Yeah, the key is
immediate reaction.
Okay, we seem to have 12 consistently, so I'm going to publish on 12 because I think, oh no, 13.
Okay, if you haven't responded, it's because you're thinking about it.
Yeah, too slow. Stuart, are you all right to just type up the results for the first 5 and then I'll swap over? Okay, so we've got our first one. So here's for rat. That's our results. A couple of questions to consider. So firstly, why do you think you found certain animals scary? And 2 straight away jump to mind. I think the spider and the snake came up with the sort of the highest percentages. Okay, really interesting responses. So actually having a look through that, just to put this into some context now, the reason we tried this experiment was because we asked you just to go with your initial sort of gut reaction towards those animals without thinking about them. And actually, if we look at it, most of you tended to give very similar responses, which hints at sort of an evolutionary explanation. Irene, I can see that you've raised your hand. Did you have a question, or was that?
Yeah, what Stuart was saying about cultural differences, I just wanted to point out maybe that although we do have these evolutionary traits within us that form the very basic foundations of our fears towards animals, I think that cultural exposure really makes a difference. Just going from personal experience, I'm Australian, but I lived in Taiwan and I'm in Germany now. And in Australia and Taiwan, I was exposed to a lot of different kind of tropical and other sort of harmful species like poisonous spiders in Australia and poisonous jellyfish, and then all kinds of other things. So I feel like that has shaped my personal reaction, but at the same time, I still have those basic fears of spiders, even though I've been raised to think, okay, there are poisonous ones, but they're still helpful towards spiders eating like bugs that we don't like. So I kind of have a question, could it be both of them at the same time?
Really interesting, actually. And I actually live with an Australian as well, and it's funny the differences, because it's almost like, I think in Australia we're very much trained from a young age to know which spiders in particular are the ones that are actually dangerous and harmful, and which ones. My friend was making me laugh, said that you need to sort of be to the hospital in 2 hours of being bitten by this one, otherwise you may die, and so forth. So actually, and almost in a way, that knowledge that they have shapes their sort of not their beliefs, their perceptions of animals, because actually many spiders they won't be fearful of. Just to put this into context, Irene, and it may answer your question, the study that Stuart and I just sort of ran, the mini version of it, was based on a real study by Bennett Levy and Marta, and they had some general findings that they found across cultures, which is that the characteristics of animals are important in how we think and feel about them. And in particular, there are certain things, they did a much larger study with 25 different pictures, I believe. And they found that actually, typically animals which are uglier, typically those that are slimy, things like slugs, things that are fast moving and sudden moving, are the things that induce more fear in humans. So actually all of these animals with more legs that have sort of jerky movements are those that instinctively make us wary of them, because characteristically they can all pose some type of threat to us. So their conclusion was that these factors lead us to believe intuitively that there's a certain fear with these animals, and we should be sort of cautious of them. So yeah, ugly, slimy, fast moving and sudden moving are the things that we tend to naturally be wary of, I guess. Two sort of broad conclusions that we might be able to tie all this together is that we may have a sort of biological preparedness to fear certain animals based upon their movement and appearance, and that might be the non-conscious aspect, going back to Ledoux's earlier idea of a short route. That might be the amygdala route. However, and this might then answer those questions about culture, our knowledge, our possibly schemas of different animals also makes us fearful as we perceive certain animals as dangerous, even those which may not be, because many spiders, many snakes in different countries are actually not harmful at all, but our knowledge of that category of animals provides us with the cognitive part which may make us fearful of them. Okay, so that's just to summarize the purpose of that activity.
Emotions are brain states. When we say we feel an emotion, we have, in some important sense, already experienced it. Our brain is already active, producing the physical substrate, underlying source of the emotion.